There is nothing more patriotic in the United States like having a weird obsession with the red, white, and blue. And no, I am not talking about the French flag, but more celebrating the United States' 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, though it wasn't fully signed until August 2nd, but who needs facts in this country? Since I have a weird obsession with lining up challenge runs on relevant holidays, I figure I could tie in a character-themed run with a very relevant character, as today, I will attempt to beat Fallout 4 as George Washington. Some quick facts to get started. George Washington was a general during the Revolutionary War, where the United States obtained its independence from Great Britain, and eventually became the first president. Given that the setting of Fallout 4 takes place in Boston, aka where a lot of the key moments of the Revolutionary War happened, it all makes sense. As for the rules of the run, I want to keep things largely era appropriate. Despite the game taking place 500 years after the Revolutionary War, the only weapons I can use are laser muskets, which works because I wanted to do a laser musket run anyways, along with the Revolutionary swords, though I never end up using them. Also, my attire must be partially era appropriate, but my pickings are very slim. For my bonus objectives, given I am playing largely in colonial times, I would need to do some themed quests, mostly Last Voyage of the Constitution, the Gilded Grasshopper, and a few others that I get distracted with. Nothing else to say, just how long will Orph manage to be a fine fellow before they let the psychotic side of their brain dump all the tea into the ocean? Let's find out. Things were pretty peaceful in Boston, just George and Martha chilling in their humble abode, or at least close to George and Martha as I can get. I am really not that good at the character creator, while at the same time, basing my character off of a quarter I found on the ground. Also, George's iconic hair I really couldn't emulate, but colonial seems close enough to the era. Once I was done attempting my dollar store shave, I just hung around the abode long enough for the salesman to scam me out of my credit card and life savings. For special stats, I really could not come up with a good build given George's credentials. He was a natural general, so in reality he should have had a high charisma if it weren't the dump stat. Probably why I was never a hit with the ladies. The main special stats I focused on was intelligence and luck. George was very smart, well for the era, if you could read you were considered a genius or rich, but I more wanted the science perk along with idiot savant. I tried to calm the baby, telling him he will not be a tyrannical dictator in his golden years, then watched on in the distance as the tea factory attempted to dump their entire stock into the ocean, which was filled with a shitload of sodium and potassium. Well, here goes the neighborhood. I just took the time to chill out and watched on as someone attempts to beat Fallout 4 as Lee Harvey Oswald, but they failed to do the research before the video. Now comes my escape. I am lacking in the fire and the arms department, which simply means leaving the cockroaches in the basement. So that's what happened to all my vigilant bodies. Back on the surface world, before I can get started on getting my weapon of the day, I should probably get some levels first. Don't want to get the Colonial Fire Squad experience, which simply means destroying historical artifacts and other landmarks critical to American history to make room for another parking lot. Once I felt happy with the leveling of the neighborhood, I erected a monument of shelves to honor the dead I honestly had no idea who they were, then began hiking towards Concord. Gotta let the folks know the British are coming, and not because of the World Cup either. I didn't spend long on my journey to the museum, mostly taking a piss at the gas station when the only toilet in the joint is full of shit and no one bothered flushing, and the dog was drinking out of said toilet bowl. I just left that gas station behind and walked into Concord. Yeah, the downtown was filled with protesters attempting to throw bullet-shaped rocks at the mayor, and I don't feel like getting caught up in that happy horse shit. So I dipped down a side alley, then arrived in front of the crowd to do some spring cleaning. I like the laser musket. You charge ammo to see how much damage you want to commit, or just be like me and miss. Let's chalk this up to being era accurate, where everyone has the same aim as a stormtrooper and less skill issue. I am totally not shit at this game. Instead of giving Preston the notion of hope, I just turned tail and walked down the road to help out the local traders. Somehow I shot Simone past Wolfgang. I don't know if my aim is that shit, or I'm that good of a trick shot. Also, when trading with Trudy, she managed to be selling a sea captain's hat. The Delaware might not be an ocean, but I mean, I love my sea captain's hat, though this attire is mostly temporary as I have a few ideas what I wish to be wearing full time. The main reason I left Preston behind isn't because I have deathclaw phobia. I just want to be sure I have enough ammunition to poach the endangered species, which all starts by slaying some ghouls that watch too much propaganda television. After pillaging the police station that has to have many amendments to the Bill of Rights dedicated towards, next up comes the hike to Arcjet. You know, sniping the hostage situation from afar, though I end up sniping the hostage, so negotiations turned awkward, and we are inside the brain drain. Instead of human brains, it is filled with cheaper AI bots that need 13 prompts to know what 1 plus 1 is. I am super frail without much in the way of defense, but that is what hiding behind a big metal tin can is for. Thanks to Dance being super overpowered, the excursion wasn't that dangerous, thankfully. Eventually we make it down to the reactor, where I just sit around for my required hour break as Dance gets well acquainted with his extended family of AI bots that slowly erode at the employment situation. Nothing quite says American, like treating the employees like shit and cutting as much as you can to make a lot more money. Well, speaking of shit, I have noticed that my jokes turn out way better the more miserable I am at work, and I did get a promotion recently, so I should be making even more hilarious jokes going forward. Help me. Once the workforces have been fired, I can start to sift through the remains for a shitload of fusion cells, enough to hopefully see me through the entirety of the game. Eventually the AI bubble can be popped, and I can grab the transmitter, break the lateral construct of time, and my brief distraction and political commentary is done. Before killing raiders in cold-blooded, I do take the time to upgrade my laser musket, even if I have to arbitrarily duplicate my adhesive. It is less me being a dirty cheater, but more practice for later endeavors. Since I have put it off for long enough, I figure I should probably bail the teacher out of the history museum. The raiders weren't that difficult. Well, they are the first raiders you would normally come across, so of course they would be simple. Sadly, they were more concerned about the slaughter part and not learning from history should they not repeat the mistakes of the past. Well, at the very least, I can be a living lesson as to the traumas of the Revolutionary War. Just a musket ball through some body parts and use some very triage without standard medicine. Infection is a pain in the ass, and don't get me started on the smallpox. Eventually, the last Minutemen can meet the last Continental Army member, and now comes cleaning out Concord. Well, things were pretty simple. Just hide in the buildings as cover, and wait around patiently until the sewer rat can come out to play, which just made things a lot easier for me. I even tried playing decoy duck with the Deathclaw, but yeah, I am really not that good of a shot. It's worth an effort, I guess. Once the Deathclaw was done chewing through its Christmas toys, every year I feel it gets easier and easier to destroy the toys, either from stronger jaws or crappier materials. It focuses its attention on me. I don't see using more bullets as a way to do more damage. I see using more cranks as a greater f*** you. The battle was pretty easy, and because I have some horrible attention issues, I just climbed through the sewers of Concord. Didn't need to, but I end up spiraling out of control this run. Well, more than usual anyways. Preston can now get his limo ride back to Sanctuary, but sadly the limo broke down on the side of the road with a broken down engine, 3 flat tires, and an exploded bag of fertilizer in the trunk, so now we have to walk back to Sanctuary. And the two armies can join in a united front. United we stand and all, and with that, now I can get started on recruiting the colonies together for a Continental Congress, even if imperialism is so tempting to recruit territories across an entire ocean. My first stop is the Abernathy's, which involves visiting the satellite array for any spy satellites spying overhead, or to spy on my neighbors, or to pick up on any subscribe transmissions. Before I pay a visit to Okok, I did a couple brief pit stops. You know, show the world how we in the United States take our aim game, blowing shit up for no reason except money, and overhunting to spite the locals. As for the array, things weren't that difficult. I don't know who Olivia was, but she wouldn't want to witness where all the body parts were flying towards. Thanks to my stealth being goodish, I don't fancy being turned into a holy figure. I can pluck the raiders from afar, and the Martian can be silenced. There is your dated reference for the video, and that is done. Oh yeah, the devs really took cockroach to a new meaning. Well, whatever tickles your fancy. I then talk to 10 blind rats bluff, and they do the usual quest, sending me to Corvega to deal with the Predator. I really don't want to be shredded through a cheese grater. We since broke up, so I guess I can head in random directions to do random things. You know, clean out a hospital of its infestation after the scientists f***ed around and found out with the homeless, and deal with a vendor that carries more and better challenge ideas than whatever shit the AI YouTube spits out, and I begin making my way towards Bunker Hill. Also, I got into a small tussle with some raiders. You know, showing these locals what spending 2/3 of your budget on powerful ordinances get you. One raider managed to outsmart me. It isn't that hard when my brain is the size of a pebble, and double lob grenades into my small rooftop, causing me to look at my load screen. Way to remind me, I need to up my defenses. Second timeline that does not create a rabbit hole of alternate history channels, I snapped the raiders from afar, not to jump on any grenades, and things went by so much better. Nothing else happened on my way to Bunker Hill besides bullying the disabled, and taking any lifelines away because I have a massive inferiority complex and refuse to tax my sugar daddies. I arrived at Bunker Hill ready for a battle, but instead, I do some brief trading with the vendors here. I was really wanting to focus on rushing ballistic weave. But, you know, super small brain that is distracted with the prospects of vivisecting vigilance estendar. I end up getting distracted and started working on the Constitution. I just murdered the scavvers and grabbed the guidance ship now instead of later. They needed to die regardless, but oh well. When I got onto the ship, the robots immediately recognized me and let me aboard the ship. Well, all but one welcomed me on, but you never disrespect your captain or someone wearing a sea captain's hat, or else you'll be thrown to the sharkies. I arrived on deck and talked to the one whose sides are ironic, and we have to play defense. I fit in just fine, since military personnel have to take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and not being the bullies of the president's mood. Things weren't too bad. A few scavvers were shot through the body, and others got a first-hand experience as to what a grape shot does to a man. Spoiler alert! Don't look it up. Once the fools were dealt with and not in a pretty way, I began miscellaneous quests for the Constitution. First up came replacing some wiring, which thanks to my intelligence being passable, I can just install the wires, no questions asked where I got the wiring from. The second mate would not be missed. I know what you did. Things did grind to a halt partway through after the navigation ship was installed. Some of the ship was still red, and next up comes the radiant portion of the quest. I didn't have the brains to skip the part of the quest, so I have to do things the radiant way. At least the plant was pretty close by, and all I needed to do was tell the insects to bugger off. Sure, I missed a lot, but the dungeon was super short, and on the corpse of the super large cockroach that makes every steroid user envious was a rapid fire laser musket. I can just use 2 different types of musket now, and I can turn in the transmitter, and next up comes the last part of the fetch quest. Just getting some turbo pumps from a nearby factory. Fort Hagen. I knew where that location was from the distance. Well, looks like I'm done writing the Constitution for now. Madison can have fun with that. Okay, enough getting squirreled. Now I should go to the Old North Church to visit the railroad. No, not to blow their brains somewhere across the Atlantic, but rather to help them out. I'm not always a psychopath, just I can't be quite a psychopath during my character runs. Weapon runs? Well, someone has to test the weapons out for quality assurance. Just ask the vigilance. And before I rendezvous with the Sins for a second round, I upgrade my new rifle, so now I have some long-range support. As soon as I traveled to the diner to head to the Deacon, I was immediately shot at by raiders. There was spawn camping, then there is this bullshit. Thank goodness I am mildly thirsty for blood. I traveled a short distance south to find Deacon hunting some ragstags, wasting my time and my frames. No idea why, but this recording session, my frames were frequently dropping, and I don't know why. I also tried to comfort a raider mourning their friend, so I did the nice thing and let them mourn together. Eventually things could be straightened out. I scared a tourist away from the country with my ice-cold reception, then came crawling around in the sewers. I followed the bum signs into the arms of the synths. Don't know if the choppy frame rate is affecting things, since if you play Fallout 4 at anything other than 60 frames per second, it gets super jank, but the synths were hitting stupidly hard. I don't mind, I'm always trying to seek out more entertaining challenges, but I'm not fond of injecting myself with enough stim packs to make the eyeballs of Big Pharma turn into literal dollar signs. I am really taking this as a sign I should really look into upping my defenses. Eventually the interior of the switchboard could be switched off. I disarm the traps I forgot I set up and stumble into them, and we can grab the prototype. Thankfully things went smooth enough. Well, as smooth as driving down an ungraded gravel road in an oversized pickup can get you, roadkill notwithstanding, and I have to fight my way out of the Starbucks. No, not that Starbucks. The Starbucks 3 blocks down past the 4th Starbucks. The synths were still packing a punch, but mostly my skill issue got the better of me, and my misses resulted in my head turning into an apple pie. Second go around, things went by so much better, and by that, I mean I didn't become highly irritated, and I briefly paid a visit to a monument dedicated to those who fought for American freedom, but I didn't feel like being free and the body parts being nuked from their sockets, so I ducked out and made my way towards Corvega. I brought out my sniper rifle, and these raiders couldn't hope to outsnipe me. Out-accuracy me? Well, that's easy. The interior of the factory was so much better. I just turned these blue-collar raiders red-collared from the bloodstains, and I popped Jared's head like a balloon. The rest of the cleanout was pretty simple, though I do find it suspicious that despite the vehicles being American-made, I am finding all the materials came from other countries. We gotta cut costs somewhere. Can't have an American dream without dashing someone else's. Eventually, I was able to slink away from the factory position, 12 on, 12 off, but my bosses keep wanting me to work 4 hours unpaid every day, and I can return to the railroad to be recruited to the cause. Given George Washington's past, I am very surprised that the railroad would let me join. Let me give you a hint. Virginia. Step 2 out of 3 to turn basic clothing into armor that eclipses most of the game is to talk to the stock market about like bonds, flooding it in a circle jerk until peasants can no longer afford to invest. I don't know. I fell asleep a lot in my econ classes. I prefer the tried and true method of disposing of the raiders the tried and true Orf way, without Rimroll to get in my way. I can't wait until I get my weave. Eventually I get my babysitting mission. Now comes what is supposed to be an easy escort quest. Now High Rise, whatever you do not climb that tower to fight the super mutants. God damn it. Well, enjoy that nuke to the face. Once the mutants were cleaned out, crappy aim notwithstanding, we could finally make our way to the safe house, and next up comes building a new base of operations, which is basically blow up the rat infestation and ransacking the settlement for myself. My last mission for the railroad is a simple one. We are just going from protecting a high-rise to climbing to the top of another high-rise. The location in question is in downtown Boston, so of course I get hopelessly lost. In fact, I get so lost I end up in Good Neighbor, and after all this time, I can finally meet a familiar face, though time really did not take too kindly to him. I really want Hancock as a companion, which means I need to get well acquainted with boiled mylark meat. Sure beats the poison known as clam chowder. Once that nonsense is done, my next goal is to meet Bobby in Diamond City, which I will get to at some point. I also sat around and listened to the speech of the longest serving president of the Continental Congress. And as a helpful tip I found out before this run, for those who are playing on PC, if you ever want to drastically improve your load times, as soon as you start loading into the Commonwealth, hit the window key and alt-tab back into the game. Saves 1 to 3 minutes of loads. It just works. In my wanderings, I did stop by the old granary burying grounds, an important graveyard. Sorry other John Hancock, sorry Paul Revere, Sam Adams, your beer is and your reps are even worse. I wandered around downtown Boston for a while, getting hopelessly lost, and I might have climbed up the wrong skyscraper a couple times, but that's neither here or there. After settling a dispute between gunners and super mutants, mostly mutants, I could climb up into the right skyscraper and open up the cache. Didn't really clear out the location. That can be solved by future generations, as it make things even worse for them. Ain't I just a nice grandparent? With my fetch quest done, I returned to the railroad to finally get my weave, finally finishing my distraction. I also returned to a couple settlements to finally recruit them to the cause. I returned to Preston afterwards, and I am named General. Finally, someone realized who I am besides just a president. I decided to put the minimum distractions on the back burner, and instead, I focused on my other distractions, like playing around with the Swan. Originally, I was going to be cheeky and lure Swan all the way to Diamond City and other locations. You know, letting the terror of Boston Commons terrorize the greater Boston region. Why?
It's because it amuses me.
However, Swan is coded to stay within his pen. God damn it. Game, why won't you indulge me on my psychopathic tendencies? Well, the fight was very unceremonious, as I just shot down the behemoth from afar until it could go down. Not an honorable kill, but I can always sell the stuff to feed my soon-to-be chem addiction. I hiked my way towards Diamond City, making a pit stop at the library to indulge the histories of the past, books wrote by real people and not regurgitated slop by a former search engine. If you ever want to have some fun at a library, even if a few books need fresh red stains, do it yourself. I also grabbed the bobblehead that hopefully improves the US education system to help improve it from 12th to not 12th. Wait, what's that? Education got cut again? Never mind. I make it to Diamond City, where Piper and the mayor were having a spat. The mayor really hates the press, and thinks the press should just be a mouthpiece of the propaganda he wants to spread, and anyone who dares question anything that could mildly disturb his ego should conveniently vanish. I take up Piper's offer and have an interview. There is a reason freedom of speech and the press was the very first amendment to the Bill of Rights. When I stepped outside to spring a jailbird, there was a hostage situation that needed to be resolved. I tried to pick the ammo off of Kyle, but it didn't go well for him. Here, Riley. Who's a good synth? Come on, Riley. Come watch your brother float on top of the water. The real reason I came to Diamond City was to spring Mel out of jail. There might have been a reason he was in jail, but that's what a few caps under the counter is for. We returned to Good Neighbor and began the arduous process of crawling beneath Boston. So many mirelurks. At least Mr. Gibson can charge right into the crab pincers. So long as I don't get cut in half, I am good. Trust me, pepitos don't taste good. I have no idea what they taste like actually. I got it from sources. Yeah. Eventually the crabs transition to zombies. They are less durable, but they are so much tougher to aim at. Or my brain just can't aim worth a shit. I did get lost in the excursion. I really don't like doing the big dig, and I accidentally went around in one big circle. Goes to show, I should try to play this mission more than once a decade. Eventually I could get back on track and find my way to the cache, just being extra careful with the ghoul after forgetting to shower more than once a decade. Sonia blows herself up in a heroic sacrifice, and it was all in vain. Bobby set us up, and 451 gave me the request to off Bobby, which I happily obliged. With the job well done, I get an extra hot weapon, and I was able to convince Hancock to come fight with me for the Commonwealth's independence. And together, the two heroic cosplayers set off to save the city. Though the thought of destroying it is all too tempting. I also borrowed Hancock's attire and armored it up. Yeah, this defense stat is way better than what I was wearing. Oh yeah, I might be wearing the wrong colored coat. Beggars can't be choosers. Don't worry, I did give Hancock another copy of his coat. Well, sure, most runs I banned companions. I mean, he is John motherfucking Hancock. Of course, I would have to let him tag along. While the tricorn would have to be worn on my head for historical accuracy, well, kinda sorta, Hancock can at the very least enjoy the wonders of the sea captain's hat. With my distractions finally out of the way, now I can start Park Street Station. Yeah, the mobsters of the 1900s can't stand up to the powers of inaccurate 1700s ammunition. I need to get better at aiming. But at least with a better scope, it should mitigate my skill issue. Yeah, things are so much easier now. I can actually click on people's heads like an overt surveillance system trying to incorrectly identify who might be doing a thought crime. And it also helps I can actually take a bullet to the chest like a real man. I know some people treat their icons like holy figures, but I don't think they mean bullets to the chest. Things were pretty straightforward through the vault, kinda caught one triggerman by surprise, and I could pop Dino's head into Dinobites and rescue the world's biggest robotic dick to begin the escape. Things were much easier for the escape, which I can happily take. I don't need any more medical mishaps to my heart. I can't afford the medical bill. I live in the USOA. Word of advice, Skinny. You might not want to stand there with some psychopath who is cranking his shaft. Preferably call the cops if you can. Oh, too late. Yeah, my strategy of picking off Skinny in the head for a first shot and hiding in the side room works like a charm as usual. And we are back outside in the heavily smog-induced air, inhaling the wonderful work of deregulated factories, churning a profit for a couple people to enjoy. And we are back in Diamond City doing a few errands. You know, doing some investigations, breaking into Kellogg Epstein's house that for some reason the mayor did not want us to know what was going on, and how he was involved greatly in the whole ordeal. And inside the gooning chamber, I get my necessary supplies to proceed to Fort Hagen. I decided to hike my way there from the north, hitting up a hostage situation since I am a good Samaritan, sometimes, and also forcefully evicting the so-called squatters from their homelands, sending them to the most remote locations to be forgotten about. Also, the country can claim their lands for the resources within. I figure I should probably get Fort Hagen started now so I can continue the constitutional crisis, and there is one easy picking spot between the hippies and the military base, and I'm not talking about laying waste to Laos, and that is the ration stockpile. You know, keeps the important assets safe for the rich and not tapped into for the masses, which simply means picking off the raiders from afar until it came time to raid the interior of the fort. Yeah, I'm not very stealthy, but I mean, military strats from the era involve standing in a line until the cannonballs make you lose your other balls. Things weren't too challenging, thankfully, and I can turn the red coat even redder coat. Thankfully, not from my blood. And in the storage room, I managed to find the settler you normally rescue from Oberlin. I was not anticipating this, but I mean, less time raiding the overpriced department store for the cheapest made shirts. Okay, enough getting distracted. Well, besides making the mayor's boyfriend sad he lost his ride, I am now inside Fort Hagen. This dungeon is pretty tricky going in from the roof, but isn't the American sick fantasy being tops only? The scents do take a few shots to go down, plus them flanking me from every angle doesn't make things all the nicer. I make it to the first boss room, where I could enjoy getting shredded by the synth leader, but after what felt like an eternity, I can finally finish the ship quest. Oh yeah, still need to blow Kellogg's brains out. The basement isn't as dangerous, thankfully, just missing robotic brains point blank as usual, along with making the chip market crash even more. All to feed the circle jerk. Just pop the Sims from afar, and grab the energy bubble head to use it as a crutch. As for the #1 creator of children advertisements, I charged up a level 5 you to Kellogg, and nearly took him out in one shot. But of course, I was 2 points of damage away from finishing the fight, so I get to enjoy having him heal up to full while being invisible. Way to waste my time, mate. I figured I should probably clear out the ads first and foremost, only to accidentally finish off Kellogg. I mean, I'll take it. Call it me being a pro gamer when I'm but a bronze player. I grabbed the brain matter chip that didn't turn into a dust bunny, and ignore the zeppelin flying in. Anything that is flying that isn't a bird is obviously witchcraft back in colonial times. Be grateful I'm not visiting Salem this run. I am back inside Diamond City, discussing the recent turn of events, just making sure to say things Hancock might like. Though the funny thing about Hancock is that he doesn't have an affinity quest. Most everyone does, and you would think Hancock might have something, but nope. Since I have put it off long enough, I returned to Pennsylvania to get the Constitution ratified, and when things looked settled, a bunch of scavers were attempting to storm the ship. They weren't that challenging. Well, one had a missile launcher, but we have cannons, and the high ground. Once war crimes were committed, we gave chase to the survivors all to manifest their destiny, so no one can tell of the other atrocities we could have committed. Nice and simple, Ironsides tell me good job, and gives me the broadsider, something I do want to play around with later, but Hancock can have fun with a pirate's life. I fire up the ship, and watch the nation sail off on its maiden voyage, starting a grand experiment. Should have placed more checks. And since I am the master of distractions, instead of going through my memory banks to remember where I stuck my car keys again, I just crossed the country to a settler who wants me to clear out a boathouse of its Florida infestation. Again, I am a magnet to distractions, and I cleared out the suburbs of its super mutant problem. The mutants weren't too bad. Well, that was until I decided to body 20 rockets to the face. How am I able to withstand such a beating?
Nanomachine, son.
Thankfully, once the hammer has been hit with the nail, the rest of the cleanup wasn't too bad. Turns out unfinished houses don't do much good if there is a tornado coming. I let mosquito experimentation go too far, and Hancock has to clean up my ass. Eventually the widow can join their deadbeat partner in the afterlife, and Preston has told me the good news. The castle is ready to be sieged. And I booked it right there, but not before visiting yet another Floridian golf course. Trust me, Bugs, you don't want what's coursing in my veins. I am practically a symbiote of the microplastic fungi. With more raiding the raiders, and forgetting to pillage their belongings, since I forgot why I was raiding in the first place, I rendezvous with Preston, and began retaking Boston's castle. The crabs weren't that difficult to take down. Wait for them to expose their belly, and let all the guts spill out, along with collecting enough eggs for a complete breakfast. The most important meal of the day. I think it is just a ploy by Big Bird to make more money from the eggs just to hide the relationship with the Count. After ingesting a baker's dozen, out comes the Queen. I have a shitload of dummy targets for the Queen to munch on. I wasn't too scared. Just charged my f***yous to the British Crown and let loose until a message was sent. Regicide never tasted so good. And to celebrate our victory, Preston sends me off to take a nuke in the face at Outpost Umonja. You too, mate. Things were weird when I got there. No, not so much watching the raiders be shredded into a fine parmesan by the war machine, but rather the old boomer not using his fat man on me. He was just stuck on a container, just using his pistol. Works for me. I think your age gap would have caused some major disagreements. I sure would love to pull myself up by the bootstraps, if only said bootstraps didn't cost 100 times more as when you were a kid. Back away from the distractions, I figure I should probably get the main story back on track, which just means reliving through someone else's PTSD from the accidentally intentional war crimes committed. A child was taken to the factories for cheap labor just to see how rich the CEO could get, and next up comes the glowing sea. Yeah, no. I think I'll rather distract myself with pretty colors, such as traveling to Fonnel Hall to retrieve a grasshopper. I just love bonus objectives, such as making sure the respawning raiders can respawn in hell. Since it has been a while and I was in the neighborhood, I figured, why not? I could always pay a quick visit to my constitutional collaborators. Somehow they survived the jump, and with a few more amendments to the constitutional space, they can make it to the ocean and to freedom. But with how polarized the circuit boards are, I don't think anything will be done anytime soon. Back at ground level, I let the super mutants know who is the new psychopath on the block, as their brains were turned into pixelated goo. Normally there is an explosive mutant here, but they must have been on lunch. The inside of the hall was not too bad. I just let the mutants know this taxation without representation won't fly. Give it 250 years or so, and the statement will eventually be representation without taxation. With the historical site cleaned out and the legacy of the forefathers pissed on, I climbed out to the roof and had a nice heart-to-heart with Hancock. Nice to know we could see eye to eye, and all I did was crank myself up with whatever needles I found in the trash can conveniently placed by unmarked vans. I grabbed the grasshopper, then defiled a nearby grave. Poor Shimdao, he really couldn't let go, without knowing the secret to escape over-encumbered out of the Sierra Madre. At least after this hell of a distraction, I now have a revolutionary sword. I probably won't use it. Before setting off to the danger zones, I did some quick side missions to pass the time. You know, deporting the alien to the afterlife, and reuniting with the Oberlin refugee I completely forgot about until now. With my main objective starting to get knocked out one by one, pay Virgil a visit in his gooning chamber. And why yes, I got hella distracted on my way there. There was one target I was going to go after. And no, it wasn't grinding a bear to a fine pulp or canceling Christmas. No, Santa will still find his prey this year. Just let me head in this general direction. Okay, I will not head in this general direction. The direction I ended up at was in Sunday prayer, where all my former neighbors decided today was the day they would sacrifice me to their dark gods. Sorry folks, my soul has already been sold. They were hitting very hard, way harder than most things were at this point, but they were all Reavers too, and Hancock was on sabbatical at this point, so it was up to me to give the ghouls the atomization they need. Just took a lot of stim packs. Not done enough with the ghouls, I did wander into Jamaica for, you know, casual American colonization of the Caribbean. No, not just because it is our manifest destiny, though it's outside the mainland continent, or all the oil in the Gulf of Mexico, but so I can rush the ending of the Minutemen. I slowly wandered my way to the southeast until I came across one Quincy Adams' birthplace. I approached this town in a specific way so I can cap Baker in the head. I really don't feel like getting $1 trillion in military spending right to the face. And thank the architect, no high ordinances were fired. With the biggest threat taken care of, I climbed the side of the highway to start plucking the gunners from afar, only to fall through the cracks to the ground below. This is what happens when you neglect your highways. Now all the apartments in my area can have a car sticking through the roof. With night on my side, the gunners were gunned down, and that was until a certain Benedict Clint Arnold came down to play. Traitors get a traitor death. 100 terawatts of voltage conducted right through a beam, right into the forehead. Well, sure beats going through the junk. At least the rest of the cleanup of the town wasn't that challenging. Tessa was but an afterthought, and to celebrate my victory over the traitors, I figured I should probably sink the boat of capsized Norwegians. Probably not the nicest thing to do, but the agility bobblehead is calling. Also, the boat decided to leave me behind. I get it, this is just a metaphor for the lifeboats of the Prolaterate being destroyed and saved for the oligarchs. But at least leave an apology letter or something. Don't leave me behind like my ex. Thankfully the boat was not that dangerous, Hancock attempting to be the star of the show as usual, and the bobblehead I really don't need is mine. And I returned to Sanctuary to drop off my collection of screwdrivers, and Preston gave me the good news. Ronnie Shaw has arrived at the castle, so now I can grab my final armor for the run. She gives me the rundown. The last general had a paranoia breakdown, thinking the government is spying on him through his fridge and his thermostat without his consent, and locked himself in the basement to starve to death. I followed Ronnie through the basement until the pet dog came out to play. Thankfully the dog was obedient, just played peekaboo with a laser musket until Sarge got too excited and exploded in a nuclear explosion. I hate it when my dogs do that. And I can grab the alcoholic stash along with his garb. Now this is a lot more appropriate for George to be wearing. With the artillery manned and a random shed being blasted into oblivion for the simple act of existing, my side tasks for the run are finally done. So I figure it is finally time to kick the remainder of the run into high gear. That of course means hiking towards the glowing sea. But first, I try to calm down the schizophrenic Phyllis. I just give her words of encouragement, and she stands down. Well, at least I don't have one more to my war crimes list. Once the local super mutant camp was decimated, survivors purged, and the history books written to make it look like George was actually a good guy, I was finally able to finish crossing from sea to glowing sea. The jog wasn't that dangerous, thankfully. At least the rat scorpions weren't melting my health like the last time, so that is a major bonus. All it took was Hancock to reveal his true angelic form to save the day. I think the whole guardian angel thing needs to be rethought over. The rest of the hike through the heavily polluted landscape wasn't too bad, just disguising a dying populace with the smell of progress. Just dump the pollution next to a playground. The kids will think they're radioactive rods or glow sticks. I'll be safe. The Green Man proposes a green deal. All I need is a green chip from Green Tech. Too bad capitalism only saw green dollar signs and ignored the rest. The climb up the building wasn't too bad. Well, besides whiffing every shot as usual. My general's armor isn't as good as my ballistic weave armor, so I need to play it safe. Really can't afford the doctor's bill. If this was any other country, then maybe I could. So I played things stealthily. You know, probably is the best idea that every citizen is armed to the teeth with guns to protect democracy. Though after taking a few rockets to the face, I am really starting to second guess this whole arms race. Never foresaw just how far these weapons will go. That is what having super aim is for. Really need to play more shooters. Thank goodness the missile launching maniac ran out of rockets. They're all lodged up my butthole after all, and the rest of green tech wasn't that bad. Really the only dangerous part of green tech at this point in the game is the missile launcher and the courser, so let's skip right there. Don't mind me, just charging my gun. 1 second, hold that thought. With Z2's held thought in my hand, I tried to alleviate some of my war crime allegations by saving the girl from the British captors, then handing the chip off to the railroad. Hopefully the chip doesn't hold the actual history of George Washington. We are supposed to keep our heroes in the highest of regards to be patriotic as possible. The kids don't need to know what George did to the Iroquois, or the fact that George's teeth aren't wooden, but rather from his slaves. That might be considered woke knowledge. I did make a quick visit to Diamond City to visit the mayor, trying to peddle how he will try to make Diamond City great again, but he was out probably golfing. Oh well, I just walked through the nearby elevator to return to the outside, and that elevator was taking a very long time. I was thinking it was going to take me to some billion-dollar safe house, but nope, just outside. That must have been the slowest elevator in the world. Ready as I can be for the end game of the run, I talked to Surges, and we used our American ingenuity to build the teleporter to get into the Institute. And with my kleptomaniac tendencies akin to a starving Pepito who has not ate healthily or even had a break in the last week, I was able to get all the parts built, though I am starting to regret getting the cheapest building materials. Anything to save a buck, I guess. Inside the Institute, I get a first-hand experience what tax dollars can do for everyone. That is chosen, the rest gets the shantytown treatment. I talked to Father, and rather than blasting this wannabe King George into next week, I decided to help him out for a couple of missions, just because the second major Institute mission is very era appropriate. I meet with the House of the Lords, and since I did remember, I decided to stroll through the Forbidden Wing to grab Virgil's serum. The assault run proved to be tricky, just because having a one-night stand with a blender really isn't the best for one's health. Totally not speaking from experience, by the way. I make it to the lab, and I could grab the serum, which I totally give to Virgil. Yep, I gave it to Virgil, since I'm a good Pepito. I totally forgot. Again. Once the faculty was greeted, I talked with Father to begin raiding the British Navy. Since I am good on settlements for the run, I ignored the racetrack and the farmers and began ransacking the ship. For the most part, the most important thing to do with the Libertalia is to nuke the Cannoneer before they have any bright ideas, like making me more radioactive than bright New Vegas. Since I had more than my fair share of Libertalia genocide in my last run, I just hiked up the wires and gave Hancock a terrible shotgun. Thank goodness the French could settle their beef with the British just on another continent. Hooray for proxy wars. I shut down the circuit board of the synth, then the biological circuit boards of the Raiders, and next up comes the most important mission for the Institute. Before I could start Bunker Hill, I figure I should invite as many people to the carnage as I can. I don't feel like joining the military propaganda machine, so I just talked to Desdemona and, yeah, I will totally go down the railroad route. Yeah, absolutely, sure. I just cap off the big battle of the Revolutionary War and began clearing out the hill. Since I am technically allied with all three factions, they never turned their attention onto me. I just began to focus my attention onto the synths. They are who we are fighting against to gain our independence. The interior was a quick in and out, and the Institute can walk out in shame. Before I talked to Father, I totally forgot to on my first go around, so I had to reload. I returned to London before I officially declare war, to get started on an undercover mission. Apparently the tyrant of Diamond City is actually a spy selling the secrets of the city to the highest bidder to gain a tidy profit. And I'm surprised Hancock didn't have anything to say about this whole mayor as a synth thing until the next quest. I gave Ao his papers, and I traveled to the roof of CIT. There is so much bullshit the British has done to the colonies, stealing citizens for loyalists, thrusting their weight around as the most powerful empire in the world, the massacre of University Point in Boston, bullying the people with their outrageous taxes, and so much other bullshit. These atrocities are not allowed to continue. It is about time we declare our independence as a nation. With John Hancock's signature, what a freaking show-off, we give Father a Declaration of Independence, and now we are at war. Also, accurate quest completion? Now comes rushing the endgame, with Institute forces descending on the castle like flies descending on a carcass of a freshly hit deer turned into a fine mist by a speeding semi-truck. When I return to Diamond City, I find a very wounded Danny who found out the mayor is screwing over the city for his own personal gain. I gave him a stim pack, and I confronted the dictator who was holding the Geneva Convention hostage. I tried to convince him to stand trial for his long list of crimes, but the courts are rigged in his favor, and he attacks us. Well, hopefully the next election we can elect someone who knows not to stand in front of a rapidly charging cannon. I let Hancock sit down and contemplate all that has happened. Ready as I can be, I traveled to the colonies, sending delegates to the castle to defend our freedom. I didn't feel like doing any more quests, this video has gone on long enough, so I just found all the companions I have found thus far and gave a battle cry, and began fighting for our independence. With our overwhelming firepower, the battle was really not that bad. I used the artillery strikes just because I can, generals giving the orders to fire and all, and the overwhelming might was enough to overwhelm the British forces. For once, the red-coated Cents were given such a humiliating defeat. The battle only lasted a few minutes, but the day is won, and it is now time to siege Yorktown. Before diving into the Institute sewers, I grabbed the most important holotape, then dove into the heavily polluted Delaware. I love all the dumping by the factories. The interior of the sewer wasn't too bad. Well, besides having a very shitty aim with the ghouls, but what else is new? At least Hancock can use his one-winged angel form to deal with the glowing one. The basement of the sewers was thankfully a lot easier than the sewers itself, and I can rally in our backup. At least my high score isn't a death count for once. The rest of the raid thankfully was not too bad. Sure, the Minutemen raid is not the easiest. That honor goes to overcompensation, but at least I don't have to worry about ammo. I wake up the sleeping beast and watch as the sentry bot turns the synth into synthetic strings to splatter. Even the biolab wasn't too bad. Well, besides having one gorilla being especially aggro, the courtyard was a step up in difficulty and is the most challenging part of the finale. My weapon is not the greatest at fighting coursers, so I leave that to my companions. I just want first dibs at committing war crimes. Let's just chalk it up to misfires. Yeah, I talked to King George and haven't signed the Treaty of Paris. He was reluctant at first, but eventually concedes. I am but an American, so I'm not satisfied until I can redirect all the oils into my coffers. The final charge wasn't too bad. With half of the backup neutered, things were a lot less strenuous than it could be. The synths are pretty easy to clean up after. The scientist brain splatters? Not really so much. But that is what planting the bomb is for. Makes the cleanup job and hiding the evidence all the easier. I take the child with me to help aid in building the next generation of heroes that hopefully won't follow in my horrible examples, and I can light the biggest 4th of July firework display in 250 years, and I have successfully beat Fallout 4 as George Washington. That was a fun run. Sure, the laser musket does use a lot of ammunition per shot, but it still makes for a viable weapon throughout the entire game. And that is the nice thing about a lot of weapons in Fallout 4. With the upgrade system, you can take the most crappy weapons and put on mods to help it last a little bit longer. The laser musket at least doesn't have a lot of fall off, so it can be viable for the entire journey. Just best used as a long-range sniper weapon. As for playing as George, I think I did an alright job. I don't know. I did not do a lot of research into this run. As a couple notes before concluding the video, videos might be coming out at a slower pace going forward. Got a promotion at work recently, and with my added overtime hours plus health, I am probably going to have to slow down my uploads. Which kinda sucks because I much prefer making these videos and suffering while making them. But I have to make money to afford the cheap and heavily processed foods. Also, the next run will be the Oblivion Bloodstarved Vampire video, so look forward to that. Nothing else to say, except a massive thank you to all my channel members and patrons who are the first signers of my declaration of war against the Vigilance of Stendar. Links to them, along with my socials and Discord in the description. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more masochism, and any other ways to torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you on the next one.